This is Inwood Lane, and I'm speaking. I am an unabashed 80 person. My daughter is an unabashed 92 person. The problem with us being in that crowd is we're grouped into being 48s. That was the number, at least depending on what sources you may have followed during the 2024 presidential election, was the polling percentage that our Vice President Kamala Harris reached and peaked. That's right, 48%, give or take what the point number was. That was also the percentage of the U.S. electorate that she garnered roughly 3 weeks ago. Her opponent, the Orange Felon Liar, received right at about 77 million votes, or 49.9%. Our vice president received 74.4 million votes, or right at about 48.3%. These numbers are as of November 24th, 2024, and are according to the Associated Press and NBC News, which reports that more than 151.4 million votes were cast. What made what made the results of the election feel so devastating was how convincing it was in the electoral college. The big talk was how the Orange Felon Liar swept all seven purported battleground states. They were Arizona, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Georgia. Not to mention, the election was called before midnight. The states with the closest voting margins were reported out of Wisconsin, Republican candidate, 1,697,626 votes, or 49.6%. Democrat, 1,668,229, 48.8%, a difference of about 30,000 votes. In Michigan, Republican, 2,818,929 votes, 49.7%. Democrat, 2,736,843, 48.2%, or about 83,000 vote difference. In Pennsylvania, 3,542,905, 50.4%. Democrat, 3,421,940, about 48.7%, or a difference of about 122,000 votes. And let's even throw in Nevada, 751,205 votes, or 50.6%. And in Democrat, 705,197, 47.5%, or a difference of about 47,000 votes. Now, just among the so called blue wall states, which were Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, the vote difference was about 235,000. But a loss is a loss. Statistically, though, that is a larger margin than what decided the 2020 election, which came down to less than 50,000 votes in the electoral college, earning Joe Biden the win. Additionally, it hardly pales in comparison to the year 2000, when Al Gore lost his presidential bid by less than 535 votes. What I'm getting at is 235,000 out of more than 151 million votes is 15 thousandths of a percent. In that context, that's how close this election was. That's right, behind the decimal point, two zeros before the first digit. And if you add the Nevada vote count, the difference was about 47,000 votes again. So, in all, less than 300,000 votes separated Harris from the presidency. That's less than two thousandths of a percent, the exact number being 18 thousandths of a percent. These numbers are of no consolation, none whatsoever. It does make you wonder, were there another 47,000 votes in Nevada for Harris? Most likely. Were there another 122,000 votes for her in Pennsylvania? Another 83,000 in Michigan and 30,000 in Wisconsin? And their answer is absolutely, most likely. In 2020, Joe Biden received roughly 81.3 million votes, or about 51.7%. The Orange Felon Liar received 74.6 million votes, or about 46.8%. Joe Biden won the Electoral College 308 to 232. That was a far more convincing popular vote win than the Orange Felon's second victory. And yes, the Orange Felon Liar got electoral college votes to Harris's 226. But then again, Biden's victory was much narrower in the electoral college. In Georgia, it was a difference of 12,000 votes. Pennsylvania, 81,000 votes. Michigan, 155,000 votes. Wisconsin, 21,000 votes. Arizona, 12,000 votes. Arguably, the margin was way closer in three states, 45,000 votes, which added to Joe Biden's lead. When you add in Pennsylvania, and that margin was more like 126,000 votes. So we're talking now 10 thousandths of a percent. That's right, three zeros before the first digit. And in 2016, if you recall, the Orange Felon Liar lost a popular vote by nearly 3 million. Hillary Clinton had roughly 65.9 million votes to the Orange Felon Liar's roughly 63 million. Yet he won the Electoral College 306 to 232, and the difference was his winning Michigan by about 10,000 votes, Pennsylvania by about 45,000 votes, and Wisconsin by about 13,000 votes. So obviously, it can't be said all three of the last three presidential elections were close in the Electoral College, which is what decides the presidency. But the underlying truth is that the votes that determined the Electoral College were close, in some cases, really close. This is of no new information, but many have not been willing to talk about that since this election. What has been talked about is the fact, as one pundit had said prior to the election, the Orange Felon Liar could be lawless, and I'll add careless and clueless, while Harris had to be flawless. And even being near flawless by most accounts still was never good enough for the electorate. So that brings me to another point in this conversation. For all those who went along with the Orange Felon Liar's denials about Project 2025, just look at the people whom he's naming to fill out his top level administration positions. A number of them were contributors to this document that prescribes a path to accomplish a hard right wing agenda under a Republican presidency, which just happens to be the Orange Felon Liar himself. For someone who claimed he knew nothing of it and never read any of it, the Orange Felon Liar's purported Agenda 47 aligns very much with Project 2025's playbook. It is a recipe of chaos, allowing the inmates to run the asylum. And I'll just leave it at that. Already, several names that appear in the Project 2025 manifesto have been named to prominent administrative positions. According to one source, the Huffington Post, those names are Russell Vaught, who was an author, Stephen Miller, who was a contributor but requested that his name be removed, Tom Homan, a contributor and linked to the Heritage Foundation, John Ratcliffe, a contributor linked to American Global Strategies, and two other names, Dustin Carmack, an author, and Brendan Carr, an author. It does not include Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, although he was indirectly linked to Project 25, in that he has ties to Kevin Roberts, who is over the Heritage Foundation. He contributed to a foreword in Roberts' book, Dawn's Early Light, that is soon to be released. Project 25 is backed by the Heritage Foundation, which has had its hand in Republican policy and has been influential in federal judge picks. Now, if you recall on the night that it was evident that the Orange Felon Liar would win the Electoral College, among his first words uttered was mandate, which happens to coincide with Project 2025's core thought, a mandate for leadership. In the Orange Felon Liar's own words, he said it was an unprecedented and powerful mandate. And of what? This mandate, he and the Republicans believe, meant that he now was tasked to give what he and they believe was what this country wants and needs. And according to Project 2025, they say the federal government is a behemoth weaponized against American citizens and conservative values, with freedom and liberty under siege as never before. The task at hand to reverse this tide and restore our republic to its original moorings is too great for any one conservative policy shop to spearhead. It requires the collective action of our movement. With the quickening approach of January 2025, We have 2 years and one chance to get it right. You know what? So that tells me that they know that they have a shrinking window of opportunity. The problem is, how can we shut the window on them? Is it too late? Maybe. At a minimum, they've got 2 years to wreak as much havoc as they can. At best, they've got 4 years to reverse course that could affect us well into the next generation and perhaps the one after that. At the core of it is the innate mission to make this society reflective of power that was once held exclusively to white males. The lone demographic that had full rights and privileges as drafted in the U.S. Constitution back in 1787. Blacks, who were mostly slaves at the time, were counted as 60%, if you recall the Three-Fifths Compromise, towards actual population. So that meant 40% of us didn't matter right from the start. Women were still 133 years away from being recognized with the right to vote. And again, blacks still were 177 years away from any substantive civil rights legislation. You also got to remember, too, now that there was no talk about Hispanics, Native Americans, LGBTQ, nor was there any talk about Arabs, Muslims, Asians back in 1787. So, what does that tell you? I've seen in recent online content that this mandate may not be driven by the electorate, but it's more so a personal mission to expand power, personal power, that is. Thus, it may be more about a dictatorial power grab and setting things up with people that will capitulate to all of his directives. Others have pointed out, based on the general election popular vote, that the margin of victory does not suggest that there was this profound, unprecedented, and powerful mandate. It may turn out in the final count, the Orange Felon Liar did not win a majority of the vote, but more like a plurality. Kind of more like how Bill Clinton won the presidency in 1992 and 1996. And that was largely because of Ross Perot's third party candidacy in both election cycles. The lone justification for this talk about mandate may be because the Republicans also won both houses of Congress, the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. But again, it was not by substantial margins, but enough to exert power as needed. Now, also as of today, the Associated Press has declared the Republicans having secured 219 seats versus 213 by Democrats. 3 seats have yet to be determined. Republicans are leading in 2 of the races. So let's presume the Republicans will hold 221 seats versus 214 by Democrats. That means they only picked up 2 seats. In the Senate, Republicans picked up 3 seats. They now hold a 53-47 advantage. Again, just enough to exert power if all the Republicans are on board with any of the legislation that the Orange Felon Liar proposes or they attempt to enact. The question is just, how much will the Orange Felon Liar attempt and manage to accomplish? Of course, mass deportation will be the first. The second is likely to be tax cuts for the wealthy and ultra wealthy. Perhaps at some point, it may include attempts at getting rid of the Department of Education, Obamacare, and along with significant cuts in Medicare and Social Security. All of that is enough for me to purchase my passport in the immediate future. And maybe along the way, I might take a shot at marketing 80 and 92. Better yet, if all things go to hell, as they very well could during this next administration, my solace could be, don't blame me, because I voted for the black woman. Thanks for listening to this segment of I'm Speaking. I am Inwood Lane.